Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the BizBlend podcast, where we dive into business strategies, tech trends, mindset shifts shaping today's digital leaders. I'm your host, Sana, and today in this episode, we are leveling up your WordPress game, but not in the way you might expect. So, whether you are a developer or a designer or a content creator, WordPress still remains a powerhouse platform, but staying ahead requires more than just the technical know how. It's about blending skills, mindset, and then a strategy to truly grow your career. And to help us break it all down, I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest listeners. Meet Matt Dorman. He's the co-founder of Ndevr, which is a WordPress agency that's helped media giants like Time, Johnson & Johnson, and Fox News scale their digital platforms for speed, efficiency, and revenue growth. But here's what I love about Matt. He's not just a tech wizard, he is a strategist. He bridges the gap between tech and the biz, helping publishers and entrepreneurs alike streamline their workflows, future proof their sites, and actually make money from their platforms. So, if you are ready to explore not just how to level up or become strong at your WordPress career, but why certain strategies do make that difference between surviving and thriving, stick around with us. We have got insights, we have got contradictions as well, and we have got some tough questions coming your way. Sorry, Matt. So let's get started. So, Matt, welcome to the show, and it's such an honor to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a great intro.
Okay, Matt. So you have worked with some of the biggest names in media. I mean, Time, then Johnson and Johnson, Fox News. So, what's one mistake you have seen even major publishers make? When it comes to scaling their WordPress platforms.
I think almost anyone, the biggest mistake is really getting into kind of the weed or getting into the weeds and not really planning ahead, and just getting the current task or current kind of feature set completed.
Okay.
And with the larger brands, that happens to be like there's always the next, the next, the next. So it's constantly adding features and not really thinking a holistic plan for the platform. Um, you'd be surprised. You'd think the larger ones have it all together, but we're all kind of
Mhm.
human and we all, do the same things basically.
So it's like getting into that trope of just going along with the trend, but not actually thinking about, okay, maybe let me do something unique which can act as my own identity.
Yeah. When,
Correct.
yeah. When you look at the trend and see what let's say your competitors are doing and trying to compete or meet them versus seeing what's next. Um,
Mm,
um,
mm. And even I can imagine many entrepreneurs or small businesses also fall into the similar traps. So how do you suggest, Matt, how they can learn from all these big players?
yeah. I mean, I've told some people about this ourselves. Like we like to talk as an agency. We're obviously in consulting. We're telling people how to do things a lot, and we get into the space of like we're kind of doing the same thing as a small. Because we're a small business. We have 10 employees. We in our space we're very small compared to our competitors. So we're always really kind of doing what our or trying to do what our competitor is doing sometimes and not getting a future planning and strategy around that. And it has to do with not just trying to future proof or look ahead about like what could be done, but what needs to be done, and setting some goals and expectations for your company, your growth, um, versus again just looking at what other people are doing and trying to match that because then you're always going to be behind the curve.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And let's talk about the skills as well. Everyone knows. In fact, I also know, even if I have a non-tech background, that there's a theme, then plugin development, then there's SEO, and so on, the basics of website and everything. But in your experience, Matt, which skills have the biggest ROI for someone who is looking to grow their WordPress career today?
Yeah, I think it's getting more and more difficult to grow a WordPress career, especially around development. I mean, if but it's always been that way. I feel like it's a commodity space where there's always some other tool or some other person that's doing it faster, better, cheaper, which is fine. It's how things have gotten better each time. I think moving beyond just the skills again to get your job done as far as development, that's
Mhm.
important. You need to learn that as a developer, designer, content person, but thinking beyond that about like, you know, especially from a developer perspective, we're a development agency. We need to understand what the people using the tools are doing, and how they're trying to, like you mentioned, we like to help our clients make money. So I need to know what ad tech things are out there, and what things are giving them abilities to do things faster, not just how I do my work faster.
Mm. And as you mentioned, in this answer, it's kind of a contradiction here that some would say that now, with so many platforms and tools available, WordPress is becoming obsolete. There are more flexible frameworks. There is Webflow, then Jamstack, but WordPress still powers, over 30 to 40% of the web. So according to you, Matt, is it still the best place to invest time and energy, or are we just kind of stuck to an aging platform?
Yeah, I think it's a case almost a case by case basis, but
Mhm.
this is one of those things where as a WordPress agency, I should say, yes, it's always the right case, but it's not. I think the majority of cases, it actually is a really good, like, as far as flexibility. And we've been building with WordPress for a long time. The idea of headless, or whether it's Jamstack or React or some other front end, those are flexible to the point where they're always adding complexity to meet the same thing that WordPress can do. We can build a WordPress headless solution with WordPress on the back end and WordPress on the front end if you'd like. It's that flexible. But with some of those other platforms, you then have to build every piece of functionality to replicate anything close to that. Um, Again, Webflow, there are definitely SaaS solutions out there for significant amount of the market share around, B2B, even some publishers, content publishers, maybe. I would argue on the content publishing side, they're they're gonna need a real CMS that has editorial tools that they can actually customize for their team, or external teams and things like that. So
Right, that's right. And what would you say about all the AI driven tools? How can someone stay adaptable in such super fast evolving landscape? I mean, what's your approach to though having that continuous learning, but also not get or jump into the bandwagon just to match up the pace?
I think from an individual perspective, like,
Mhm.
allocating certain amount of time in whether it's your day or your week, to trying these new tools. Um, I'm not a I'm not gonna tell you that, we're gonna be using these 100% in a few years, but I think it's a significant amount of your time will be spent using these tools. Um, you know, let's say 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, our team really wasn't using it for day-to-day development or day-to-day content, creation, or any of our kind of internal workflows. But between 6 months and now, it's a significant amount of our workflow. So we're now not really having to catch up because we were spending the time to test out and try some tools. But again, those were on kind of personal basis. We're not a big enough enterprise to like have a big investment and tell our people to do things. So that's a harder one to tell like enterprises that they need to adopt it in their IT or something like that. I know they are, but I think those are both risks and possibly some big rewards on that. But I've been in the IT industry long enough that I don't think that there's like as far as like a company adopting it, I don't think you're going to get late to the game. I think you're just going to get the next best thing whenever you join the market. Versus if you're trying to build a product, then there's some kind of push to do it early.
Hmm. That definitely makes sense, Matt. And now let's talk about the execution part. So, since you have worked with media giants, enterprises, if you can share maybe one or more than one case studies, just at a professional level, how they can hone their skills when it comes to WordPress.
Yeah, I think if you're an enterprise that's actually focused on building on WordPress,
Mhm.
I think it's very important to be an active contributor in the community. So if you have a larger team, and by contributing it means whether it's contributing to open source projects or helping train other people to do the tools or to use the tools. Those are going to give you gains as an employer, because the people are going to be more happy to work for you, because they're not just doing their day-to-day job all the time. I think it's hard to say like how do you level up as a company. I think is more just investing in the platform that you're using. And the best way
Mhm.
you can invest in WordPress is by contributing, whether it's time or sometimes plugins if you've developed plugins as a company. There's a big ecosystem around that as well, both free and paid.
Yeah. Yeah, I think networking and then being active in the communities, it's really really important. Yet it often gets overlooked, especially in the tech world. But that's a great advice, Matt. And also, uh, not just about staying updated on the trends or about the skills, but then you also emphasize on the mindset and strategies, to kind of master it, which can accelerate the growth for professionals. So, would you like to share tips or maybe tools which you adopted to get onto the game?
Yeah, this'll I don't know if this will come across the right way, but the mindset around WordPress development, if you can think of it a couple of ways, like I think of it, or I've pitched this to people, like
Mhm.
one of the big reasons people go with headless or some of the architecture is because it's the next cool thing, and WordPress has been around a long time, PHP even longer. So kind of enticing PHP developers to join the team and stay within architecture, which everyone is telling them is antiquated, or there's better tools out there. I think you have to start looking at what are the problems that we're solving, and is it easier to solve it with something else? Because it's maybe more fun to solve it with something else, and that's a hard thing to get around with a developer. I'm a developer myself. I like to do fun things, but
Mm.
as someone that wants to work for clients and or as a job and actually make the clients and companies money, we have to do things efficiently. So it's a very efficient tool set. I would say so that mindset of understanding kind of the bigger needs of who you're working for or who you're working with is really something to get across earlier in your career as possible, versus
Mm.
just because that'll you'll win from that. Because if just because you're doing the latest, you can always learn a new language. I think that's especially if you're a decent developer, you're going to learn a new language very quickly, and get the experience needed to get that new job if you need to. But learning how to help the company that you're working for is kind of more important, and it'll show for like referrals and things like that.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I agree. That's like the super basic prerequisite here.
Mm.
Okay, and another big one. Yeah, I mean security. We it not be the most attractive or the most important, per se, but it is critical. But so, what are the top security habits you recommend for WordPress developers or maybe site owners, especially those who are working on the high traffic platforms?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I would say any platform. I think that the smaller traffic platforms are actually the ones that get hit typically the most. You'd be surprised because there's so many of them out there on so many antiquated kind of versions and different plugins. So, but
Okay.
but across the board, I think having some kind of methodology around scanning
Mhm,
your software as well as the front end site is really critical. There's
mhm,
plenty of solutions out there that do it relatively cheaply, from like almost free to $5, $10 US a month to like, 30 or $40 a month on
mhm,
their site. So it's really inexpensive. Maybe you can spend a couple hundred if you really need to have it done a lot, maybe multiple times a day. So the scanning and kind of monitoring of both the code base as well as the front end side is really the way to go. I mean, people like to say WordPress is or isn't secure.
mhm.
Both are accurate depending on who built it, and what feature was released, today, on your site.
That's surprising. That's surprising that, smaller or even lower traffic websites, they are more vulnerable to these kind of attacks. And also, you know, if let's say as a WordPress developer, I'm working with a client, and I'm kind of trying to translate the same thing to a non-tech entrepreneur or a client, then how can we help them understand the significance of this, without ensuring, without, kind of getting lost in the jargon?
Yeah, I think for someone trying to kind of do that on a non-technical basis, numbers are the most important thing. So having whether it's case studies or just statistics around, because again, those lower traffic sites are not necessarily vulnerable to themselves monetarily. Typically, they're attacked to then attack other sites. However, if they're a smaller e-commerce site,
Mhm.
that could be exposing their users' data in some way. So depending on the site, the numbers are gonna be different, but, you could be telling them that they're gonna be impacted by thousands of dollars or hundreds or millions of dollars in lawsuits potentially, um, depending on kind of the type of site that they are. But again, those numbers are gonna be where that translation is gonna come very quickly, especially to business owners, 'cause we need to look at our numbers all the time, and, the technical kind of complexity or what you're doing, doesn't always translate very well.
Hmm, that makes great sense. Great. So, Matt, before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect with you for more exploring more about, how they can master the WordPress game, and also, strategize, optimize their WordPress career, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah, I think the best way is our website. It's spelled a little weird, Ndevr. It's spelled Ndevr.io. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. My business partner, actually, she's going to be speaking at the Montclair WordCamp in a couple of months. So if you're in New Jersey, that would be one way to reaching to us.
Great. I'll make sure to have the link and the details in the show notes, Matt. And thank you. Thank you so much for sharing such clear, straightforward, and practical, actionable insights in such a simple way. Because even for a non-tech person like me, I could, I could, very well understand the equations, the dynamics here. So I'm very sure our listeners, whether they are developers or entrepreneurs or even content creators, they're definitely walking away with some great, fresh perspectives.
All right. Thanks again for having me.
And to all of the BizBlend listeners, if you are serious about leveling up, it's not just about mastering the latest tools, as Matt, very well explained. It's about adopting the right mindset from the start, and then staying adaptable, and also building the right connections. And as Matt reminded us well, that blending business and tech, it isn't optional anymore. It is essential. So with that, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review if this episode gave you something to think about. Catch you soon.